Customer vulnerability has seen an exponential rise in 2020. Significant rises in unemployment have left many in the UK and across the world worried about their finances and how they're going to pay their mortgages, utilities bills and insurance premiums. Professionals from the insurance, utilities and indeed many other sectors have really stepped up, providing their customers with payment holidays and enabling those customers to reach out to them by implementing new channels specifically set up for customers in vulnerable circumstances. More than 1 billion people in the world live with some form of disability, of whom nearly 200 million experience considerable difficulties in functioning. The purple pound equates to 249 billion a year added to the UK economy, yet very few businesses have direct strategies to tap into their consumer market. The time to change this is now. Today, our What If webinars have featured us chatting with Helen Pettifer, a vulnerable customer expert who specialises in helping clients to better serve vulnerable customers. We've also spoken to Chris Knapp, technology strategist at Microsoft, about how chatbots can help to quickly respond to customers in vulnerable circumstances, and explored how to respond to customers living with mental health problems as a result of the pandemic, with founder and CEO of charity Chasing the Stigma, Jake Mills, and Citizens Advice's Principal Policy Manager, Dr. Elizabeth Blakelock. Here are some of our highlights from those episodes.
Yeah, so my top three: training, time and tone. So firstly, training, even if it's not training for in any kind of big set piece, if you can make sure that your people are aware of mental health challenges, and that can be from a personal perspective, that could be about supporting each other and each other's mental health, that will build that resilience in terms of not only working together, but also then in supporting customers. Tone of communications. We've seen some very difficult messages going out, particularly around people being asked to, if they're not a priority case, to wait, and some of the tone of that has really made people really worried. So to make sure that the tone of communications is really supportive. And then time, please just making sure the time is there for people to get used to their new financial situation, and then to be able to meaningfully communicate with you about the way that they can then repay this debt. So training, time and tone.
Yes, we are focusing on that financial problems at the moment, but I would say that this is something that does and will affect everybody in some way, shape or form as we start returning to work and life as we're going to have to get used to it. It's going to take a long time. So there's a short term, but there's definitely a long term of making sure that we are making help and support as easy as possible to find. Keeping those conversations going, not just whereas in the past a lot of people have done a lot of gestures and, you know, having a day saying let's talk about mental health. It's got to be part of policies as we are going back to work, both for staff and for customers, and looking at actual practical things that we can be doing.
Putting some applications in place which can basically enable organisations to react a lot faster. And so I think really trying to look after their end users. I think we've had a lot of organisations that have put some applications in place that would understand their needs, and so giving like basically as an organisation, your employees that ability to feedback if you are feeling vulnerable, if there's bits of support that you need from an organisation where they can feed that back very fast. And so using things like Power Apps to do that has really given the end user that confidence that the organisation cares about them, but also as an organisation a bit more understanding about what their employees need. I think that's been really powerful. But then there are changes to this, and so I think I appreciate I'm going back to insurance again, but with the COVID situation, there are a lot of policies where like an impact of COVID is covered, and there's some that isn't. And so for those aggregators and I won't name the individuals, but for the price comparison websites that have those policies, some have done a really good job of reaching out to their customers to say, right, this is how you're covered, instead of them having to phone up and wait onto that, go into that contact center and be part of that queue that adds to the problem. Them being proactive has been really powerful. And again, that's about understanding the industry and understanding the customer.
I think it's the organisations that have the most channels available, because everybody is different and everybody has a preferred channel. So, you get an older population, they still do like to engage with people over the telephone. They like to have that human interaction, just to sort of say, okay, so I now know that you're taking that task on and I don't have to worry. Whereas there's a lot of, it's building that trust in older people in technology. A lot of people don't like online banking, telephone banking. It's, well, what are they going to do with my money? Is it safe? All of these things. So it's having a wide variety of channels, and asking the customer that, how do you want us to communicate with you? What's your preferred communication channel? Do you prefer web chat? Do you prefer that we text you, MSM you? All of those things. So as many possible channels as you want. And I think as well, it's thinking about the written content as well. So going back to those payment arrear letters, is how that tone of voice comes across in that letter. It's sort of wanting the customer to engage with you, to actually start that conversation of how we can, get this payment plan set up. How much can you afford to pay each week, each month? Sort of get that tone of voice right that encourages the customer to contact you to talk it through. You get it wrong and it completely loses all engagement.
The first thing to say is it does very much depend on whether you're approaching the work from the perspective of improving an existing estate or you're starting from scratch. The reason being, I tend to use an analogy around the physical world where you might have a building, and if you have a building that was built 15 years ago and your intention is to improve its support of disabled users, then there's various things you can do. You can put in ramps, you can put in lifts, you can put in hearing loops, you can put in lots of fixtures and fittings which will improve the access to that building. If you sort of compare that with the idea that you have a blank piece of paper and you have an architect and you have a focus group of people made up of all different walks of life and different backgrounds feeding into the design of a new building, then you have a very different thing, because baked into the fabric and the DNA of that building are all of the things that you need: the layout and the structure of rooms and the positioning of rooms and the length of corridors and staircases and stairwells and the width and so on. And so there's many more features that you can build into design when you're starting from scratch. So it is quite important to remember that where you're starting on your digital journey is impacted as to whether you're fixing or improving an existing estate or you're starting from scratch. To come back to the question specifically is kind of why it's important to holistic approach is Microsoft defines the idea of you solve for one and you extend to many, and it strikes to the heart of user-focused design in that if you get designers to focus on the user's needs and provided the users are clearly defined and you have an understanding of who your customers are, then when designers are focused on designing around those needs, then the solutions will naturally present themselves and then consequently be engineered. Whereas if you come to a product that is already built and try and retrofit accommodations in, you're making some progress and some improvements, but you're not necessarily baking it into the DNA. So the takeaway I'd say is, if you're starting from scratch, if you've got a blank piece of paper, or you're within the next 2 to 5 years, you're embarking on a major replatform or a major new site build, don't let accessibility be a single line item in your RFP saying a website needs to be WCAG compliant, because you've got to remember WCAG was drafted in 2008. The 2.0 specification was drafted in 2008. Responsive design didn't really exist. Apple released, I think, the first iPhone in the same year. And so much of the original document was focused around the needs of vision impaired users on desktop devices. And the reality is disabilities and impairments and the types of people you're going to be serving is way beyond vision impairment. So if you're starting from scratch tomorrow, don't just look at WCAG. Approach it from the very beginning. Get your designers focused on the problems of your users and move it forward from that point.
So there you have it, the highlights so far from our What If webinar series that have covered vulnerable customers. If you would like to catch up on any of our previous episodes, you can find them on the News and Insights pages at www.mando.agency and on the Mando YouTube and Vimeo channels. We hope to see you attending a What If webinar in 2021 and gaining valuable insights from a range of professionals striving to improve customer experiences using digital channels.